What the American military really hides behind its enormous defense budget will surprise you. It may change the way you see global power forever. The United States spends $849 billion each year, which is more than the next 10 nations combined. Yet the country that is racing to challenge that dominance is not only growing, it is accelerating. China pours $246 billion into its armed forces and is producing warships at a pace never witnessed in history. In the year 2024, it launched its third aircraft carrier, while the United States Navy fought to maintain a fleet of roughly 290 ships. One superpower leads in experience and advanced technology. The other leads in industrial speed and regional focus. The debate is no longer about who is larger. The true question is who is positioned to win the conflicts that genuinely matter. This is the real balance of power. For 70 years, American dominance appeared unquestionable. Carrier strike groups spread across the world. Logistics networks linked continents. Forces battled in Iraq, Afghanistan, and many smaller conflicts. No nation projected strength like the United States. Yet modern wars are not global. They ignite in specific regions. And in the Western Pacific, where a potential Taiwan confrontation could erupt, the balance shifts. China does not need to overpower the United States everywhere. It only needs to control the waters and air within 1,000 miles of its coastline. Inside that battle space, it has built advantages that the Pentagon is only beginning to counter. Can the United States military defeat China in a Western Pacific conflict? Or has the balance of power already shifted? This isn't about troop counts or total aircraft. Modern war between superpowers comes down to three domains: naval power projection, missile supremacy, and the ability to see and strike first. The US built its military for global reach. China built its military to deny American access to the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. These are fundamentally different strategies, and only one can dominate when they collide. The US Navy fields 11 carriers. China has 3. But China operates over 370 warships to America's 290, and it's adding hulls at triple the US rate. The US Air Force flies the F-35 and B-21 Raider. China flies the J-20 and is testing 6th-generation prototypes. America invented precision strike warfare. China now fields more missile launchers than the US has interceptors. But here's where it gets interesting. In 2024, China launched 23 major warships. The United States launched 4. China's shipbuilding capacity is now 232 times larger than America's. Not 2.3 times, 232 times. Chinese shipyards can produce destroyers, frigates, and amphibious assault ships in 18 to 24 months. American yards take 4 to 6 years for comparable vessels. The gap isn't closing, it's widening. Here's why this matters more than raw carrier counts. Modern naval warfare isn't about battleship slugfest. It's about distributed lethality, spreading firepower across dozens of platforms, so no single strike cripples your fleet. China's Type 055 destroyer carries 112 vertical launch cells loaded with anti-ship and anti-air missiles. The US Navy's Arleigh Burke destroyer carries 96. China operates 8 Type 055s. China's numerical advantage creates a strategic problem called missile salvo exhaustion. In a Taiwan scenario, Chinese warships could launch 1,000-plus anti-ship missiles in the opening hours. American carrier groups carry roughly 500 interceptors. The math is brutal. You can't shoot down everything, and once your magazines are empty, you're 1,000 miles from the nearest resupply port, while Chinese ships reload from bases 100 miles away. But here's the kicker. China's fleet has one massive weakness: zero blue water combat experience. Chinese crews have never fought a peer adversary. They've never coordinated multi-carrier strike groups under fire. US Navy personnel train against realistic threats constantly, and they've been doing it for decades. Experience wins battles. Numbers win wars. The question is, which advantage matters more in a short, intense regional conflict? What happened next changed the entire equation. China operates roughly 2,200 land-based ballistic and cruise missile launchers. The United States, until 2023, operated 0, thanks to the now defunct intermediate-range nuclear forces. Let that sink in. For decades, America couldn't field ground-launched missiles between 500 and 5,500 kilometers, while China built the world's largest arsenal of precisely those weapons. The DF-21D carrier killer can strike ships 1,500 kilometers away. The DF-26 extends that range to 4,000 kilometers, far enough to hit Guam. The DF-17 hypersonic glide vehicle travels at Mach 10 and maneuvers unpredictably, making interception nearly impossible with current system. Here's what this means operationally. American carriers must stay 1,500 plus kilometers from Chinese shores to avoid DF-21D strikes. That's roughly the distance from Taiwan to Japan. Operating from that range limits the F-35C's combat radius, reduces sortie rates, and forces aerial refueling missions that expose tankers to Chinese interceptors. China's missile advantage isn't just about hardware, it's about doctrine. The People's Liberation Army designed its entire military strategy around anti-access area denial. The goal is to make it so costly for American forces to operate near China that they don't even try. Every Chinese missile battery, every coastal defense system, every submarine nets the Pacific with overlapping threat envelopes that force U.S. ships into choke points or keep them out entirely. The U.S. response has been long-range precision fires. In 2023, the Army deployed its first ground-launched Tomahawk missiles to the Pacific. In 2024, they tested the long-range hypersonic weapon, which matches China's DF-17 range, but with better targeting flexibility. By 2027, the Pentagon plans to deploy 1,400 plus ground-launched missiles across Japan, the Philippines, and Guam, enough to hold Chinese naval bases at risk and break the A2AD bubble. But there's one problem nobody's talking about. Missile counts only matter if you can see the target, and China is winning the invisible war. War in the Western Pacific will be decided in the first 6 hours. Whoever strikes first before the enemy's fleet leaves port, before its aircraft launch, before its missiles arm wins decisively. That requires one thing: knowing where everything is, in real time, across millions of square kilometers of ocean. China operates the world's most advanced satellite reconnaissance network. The Yaogan constellation includes over 50 synthetic aperture radar and electro-optical satellites that can track carrier groups even through cloud cover. China's Guanlan project aims to detect submarines using laser pulses that penetrate seawater, a capability that would end the survivability of America's ballistic missile submarine fleet if it works as advertised. The United States leads in different ways. The Space Force operates GPS satellites that provide precision targeting for every American missile and smart bomb. The National Reconnaissance Office fields radar and signals intelligence satellites that can intercept Chinese communications and map their electronic order of battle. But America's satellite advantage is narrowing. By 2026, China will operate more reconnaissance satellites than the US. Here's the wild card: space warfare. In 2024, China tested a co-orbital satellite that approached a US reconnaissance satellite and inspected it, likely mapping vulnerabilities. In a conflict, Chinese anti-satellite missiles could blind American forces within hours, severing the data links between ships, aircraft, and command centers. The U.S. Space Force is developing jam-resistant communications and satellite defenses, but the technology is still immature. The side that maintains situational awareness longest controls the battle tempo, and in 2025, that's a coin flip. This is where things get even more complex. The U.S. Air Force operates 1,900 fighters. China operates 1,200. The U.S. flies 5th-generation F-22 and F-35s with stealth profiles that make them nearly invisible to radar. China flies the J-20, its own 5th-generation fighter, but in smaller numbers and with less combat-proven engine. On paper, American air dominance looks unshakable, but modern air war isn't fought over neutral territory. It's fought over Taiwan, 120 miles from Chinese airfield and 5,000 miles from major U.S. air bases. The People's Liberation Army Air Force can surge 400-plus fighters into the Taiwan theater within 2 hours. The US would need days to position comparable numbers, and those aircraft would operate from bases in Japan and Guam that are already targeted by hundreds of Chinese missiles. But here's where American technology creates a nightmare scenario for Chinese planners. The B-21 Raider stealth bomber, operational in 2024, can penetrate Chinese airspace undetected and strike missile batteries, command centers, and naval bases from standoff range. China has no equivalent system. The B-21 changes the calculus because it forces China to defend everything simultaneously, diluting its forces and creating gaps American submarines and surface ships can exploit. Which brings us to the final advantage that could decide everything. The United States operates 68 nuclear-powered submarines, 50 attack subs, and 14 ballistic missile subs, plus 4 converted Tomahawk launch platforms. China operates 62 submarines, but only 12 are nuclear-powered. The rest are diesel-electric boats with limited range and endurance. This is America's decisive edge. U.S. submarines are quieter, faster, and equipped with better sonar and weapons than any Chinese equivalent. A single Virginia-class attack sub carries 40 Tomahawk missiles and can sink Chinese destroyers before they know it's there. Spread 30 American subs across the Taiwan Strait approaches, and you create an underwater kill zone that makes Chinese amphibious invasion nearly impossible. China knows this. That's why it's investing $50 billion in anti-submarine warfare. Helicopters, corvettes, sonobuoy networks, and undersea sensors. The South China Sea is now blanketed with Chinese hydrophones that listen for American subs. It's not perfect, but it's getting better. By 2030, Chinese ASW capabilities may neutralize the U.S. submarine advantage in shallow coastal waters. The countermove is that the U.S. Navy is developing extra-large unmanned underwater vehicles, drone subs that can operate autonomously for months, laying mines, gathering intelligence, and launching torpedoes without risking human crews. If these systems deploy at scale, they multiply America's undersea advantage by 10. The question now isn't whether American subs are superior, it's whether China can find them before they strike. So, can the United States military defeat China in a Western Pacific conflict? The answer is yes, but it requires fighting a different kind of war. The US cannot win a war of attrition near Chinese shores. China's shipbuilding, missile numbers, and geographic proximity create overwhelming advantages in the first 1,000 miles from its coast. American carriers, tankers, and surface ships become targets, not assets, in that envelope. But the US can win through 3 strategies: submarine dominance, long-range precision strike, and the ability to extend the battlefield beyond China's missile range. American subs can choke Chinese sea lanes and sink invasion fleets. B-21 bombers and ground-launched hypersonic missiles can strike Chinese bases from standoff range. And if the US can maintain space-based surveillance while degrading China's satellite network, it forces Chinese forces to operate blind, the same disadvantage the US would face if China struck first. The critical variable is time. In a 72-hour war, China likely seizes Taiwan before the US can fully respond. In a 30-day war, American logistics, alliance networks, and technological depth overwhelm Chinese regional advantages. First, naval power isn't about carrier counts anymore. It's about distributed missile magazines and the ability to sustain fires over weeks, not hours. China wins day 1. The US wins day 30. Second, the side that controls space-based surveillance dictates battle tempo. Whoever goes blind first loses. Both nations are now building anti-satellite weapons, which means the next war might begin in orbit, not at sea. Third, Taiwan itself determines the outcome. If Taiwanese forces hold for 7 days, the US can reinforce and turn the tide. If Taiwan falls in 72 hours, no amount of American firepower reclaims the island without catastrophic losses. The balance of power is shifting, not because American technology is failing, but because China is building for a specific fight in a specific place. By 2030, China will operate 400-plus warships and 3,000-plus missile launchers. The US is racing to deploy enough distributed forces, submarines, ground-based missiles, unmanned systems to counter that numerical edge before the window closes. The question now isn't whether the US can defeat China. It's whether deterrence holds long enough that neither side has to find out. Because once the shooting starts, both militaries are optimized to strike first and strike devastatingly. And in that scenario, there are no winners, only degrees of catastrophic loss. What happens next will determine whether the 21st century is defined by peaceful competition or the most destructive war in human history. The weapons are ready, the strategies are set. The only question left is whether leaders on both sides understand that some wars can't be won, only avoided. If you want deeper insight into the rivalry between the United States and China and how their militaries compare, then subscribe and follow for more analysis.